for joining me. I guess, Sarah, are you able to let me know when you can see my screen there?
I can see your screen.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, thanks everyone who logged in today. For those of us in BC and Alberta, it's a little bit early, so good on you for waking up on a Saturday morning to study. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the LARE Prep Section 1. I just want to make sure that you can see my full screen here. Okay, that looks right to me. So the kind of the session of the format is I'll talk a little bit about how to just get started getting through the exam process in general, and some of the study materials that I found useful for Section 1. But then I really want to try to make it to bring it home to the work that hopefully you're doing day to day in your jobs as intern landscape architects. So I'm not sure how many of you work at a traditional kind of landscape architecture firm where there are projects, there are project managers, there's someone doing construction administration on those projects, and then you're overseeing field services. If you work at that type of a firm, then I think that you're in a really good position to learn a lot of the exam content for Section 1 on the job. So what I want to focus on is how can you seek out opportunities so that you're trying to learn this stuff and get paid to learn it as much as possible, because I think that's how you'll be most effective on learning the material and getting through this exam. And then what we're going to do is just go through some of the CLARB practice questions and try to really bring it home and have a discussion. I'm hoping that we'll be able to have some of you share some examples from your work so that we can start to see how some of the exam questions are actually about day-to-day things that you probably already have to solve as part of your routine work. So I just threw a few examples of a photo from a project. This is a project I'm working on right now, and it's a very simple project. If you were just walking down the street and you saw this, you know, it's a few planting beds in a concrete field, but you just wouldn't believe how much project management, construction management goes into even sometimes the most seemingly simple project. So, you know, I'll try and bring up some examples as we go through this on the times that I've had to learn, for example, how to read through a contract as part of my work. So this is the way that I did, the order in which I did the exams, and I would recommend it. I'm not at all an expert on this. You know, I did all 4 exams and I passed all 4 exams on my first try, but I have no idea whether I aced them or I just snuck through. So all I can do is kind of share what worked for me, and I'm sure there's other ways of doing it. But the way that or the order in which I did it is I kind of focused on the exams that I felt dovetailed best with the training that I got at school first. So Section 2 in particular, and Section 3, the kind of the inventory and analysis and the design exams, for me, those felt very much in line with some of the stuff that I had learned at school, even some of the readings I had already done. So it made a lot of sense for me to just jump right into those exams pretty quickly after I graduated with my MLA. Section 4 and Section 1, those ones were much scarier to me, to be honest, especially Section 1, which I'm going to be talking about today. So Section 4 deals with grading, drainage, construction documents, particularly the construction documents side of it, and specifications. That wasn't something that I had done very much at school, so I found it useful to work for a couple of years and then do that exam. I did it probably after a full 2 years of being employed, and I found that a lot of the work that I did in my job was directly beneficial to learning how to the questions that were asked in that exam. So I have an image up of this project that I did. You know, this project was really tight. I did a blow-up grading plan at 1 to 50. And this project right here, like pretty much single-handedly got me to pass my Section 4 exam. So I got paid to do all of that grading studying. After I did the grading on these steps in this water feature, well, the little drag and drop exercises in Section 4 were a breeze. So I would recommend, try to take a stab at doing some really difficult grading projects at work if you happen to be also thinking about doing Section 4 as well. But this is the one we're going to focus on, Section 1, Project and Construction Management. I have to say I was terrified of doing this exam, and it wasn't easy. I studied quite a bit for it, and I had a lot of great opportunities at work to do particularly the construction management side of it. And I still walked out of that exam not sure if I had passed or not. Thankfully I had, but I think of any of the exams, this is the one that felt the scariest and probably the hardest for me. So I hope that I can help you a little bit and maybe make you feel a little less scared than I was to take that one. And then finally, the last step in this whole process was passing the Board of Examiners. And again, the questions that were asked during that Board of Examiners interview were very much the types of questions that I don't think I could have answered without having done the 3 years of work that I had done. So a lot of my answers had to do specifically with things that I learned at work and not as much with things that I learned at school. So this is what I'm going to really try and drive home for you, is to seek out opportunities that you can be getting paid to. I would recommend, you've got to get this book. You've got to read through it. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about some of the chapters that are the most useful, but it's, I don't know, if you can pass the exam without understanding a lot of the stuff in this book, then maybe the exam wasn't as hard as I felt it was. There are some other books. There's Sustainability and Design Ethics from Russ. To be honest, it sounded like something that I really needed to read, but the book wasn't very concrete. It didn't feel to me like it translated directly into the knowledge that I needed to pass the exam. So if you're feeling really tight for cash and that's you don't have access to the book, that's maybe how I would recommend saving a little bit of money. The other one that's recommended on the CLARB reading list is The Professional Practice of Landscape Architecture. That's by Walter Rogers. And I think this is another one that's probably useful to have for sure. Amazon has it listed for around $100, but I'm pretty sure that you can find it for cheaper than that if you buy a used copy. And yeah, this one is probably worth getting if you're studying for this exam, but I think it could be useful just in your future as a professional. There's another book called Project Management for Design Professionals. I really wanted to get this book. It sounds great. I'd still like to get it, but it's about $500 or more than $560 without the tax. So this was one that I didn't get. If some of you have it, then it looks like it's probably a really great book to use, but the costs seem prohibitive to me. There are a couple of other documents you should consider. There's the Landscape Architecture Documentation Standards. This is a book published by Design Workshop, the design firm. And it's just an amazing book in general. Like, it's very humbling. The work that Design Workshop does is incredible, and the kind of the process. This really outlines a process that they use, and I find it really just interesting to read and to kind of see like the level of rigor that can be applied to landscape architecture that I think our firm could probably learn quite a bit from. And it's really good for the kind of pre-project management and quality control sections for LARE Section 1. And then the Canadian Landscape Standards is a good resource for maintenance. And I've just on this page here, I've highlighted some of the chapters that I would recommend that you really focus on for the other two books, for the professional practice book and construction contracts book. Maybe take a screenshot of that. You know, if you have time, read the whole book, of course, but these are the chapters that I personally feel like were most represented in the exam content, and these are the ones that I would focus on. So what I want to mostly speak about in this study session is how do we bring home the exam content into the work that you're very likely already doing, or how can you seek out opportunities to learn this stuff on the job. So I'm going to go through each of these sections in a little bit more detail and kind of talk about, well, what does this stuff really mean? What does it actually look like? Yeah, and I do encourage you to, this is on the CLARB website. It's part of the, I forget what it's called, but it's kind of like the CLARB, oh yeah, here it is, CLARB orientation guide. So it's easy to find, and definitely have a look through this list. And if there's anything here that you just don't even know what it means, you know, I was there, like when I was first starting to study for this exam, there were a lot of these terms, to be honest, I didn't know what that was. So go through the list, and if there are some terms that you're like, yeah, I've done that 100 times, then great, maybe you don't need to focus on that. But if there are some terms that you just don't even know, I don't know, like, do you even know what an RFP is? Like, if you don't, that's probably something you want to look at before you take the exam. So the pre-project management phase, this is the kind of 10% of the exam is listed by CLARB around things like selecting project teams, developing contract, negotiating contracts, preparing RFPs or RFQs, determining project scope, schedule, and budget. These are things that are very much in the project management side of things. And I would say they're things that a lot of interns don't get opportunity to work on day to day. If you happen to, you know, maybe you're just freelancing and running your own firm, and maybe you're looking for, you know, you're putting in proposals and working directly with clients, and maybe you're a little bit more familiar with this. This is some of the stuff that I found the hardest, the project management side of things, because I didn't get that many opportunities to do project management at work. But there are some things that I think you can do to start, at least to start understanding, well, what are your project managers doing? How does that affect your work, and what are the things that they're thinking about? And maybe there's an opportunity for you to take on a little bit of that work as well. So some of my points of advice just to start focusing on now as you're kind of gearing up to take the exam, you just think about, like, of the projects you're working on, well, how are they structured? You know, is your firm the prime consultant on that project? Are you a sub-consultant? Maybe you can have a chat with your colleagues or your project manager about what the implications are of that. These are the types of things that you'll probably have to understand a little bit about for this exam. Writing proposals, reading through your proposals and your standard contract for design services it would be a really useful task that you could do to prepare for the exam. So before I wrote the exam, I did have some opportunity to help writing proposals for Murdoch degree. So I got to do things like putting together a project scope and a budget. That's what an example of that is. So you know, understanding, well, how do we estimate our time? How do we know how much a project is going to cost us to throughout all of the different phases that it's going to go? How long will that work, and who's going to work on it? Those are some of the kind of pre-project management questions you might have to address. And so if you understand how your firm handles that work, you're probably going to be in a good position to answer the questions properly. I'd say, you know, probably most firms have put quite a bit of work into thinking about how do they put in a proposal and make sure that it's for enough money to actually break even or turn a profit. I'm reading through, here's just one page of our contract terms. All of this stuff is kind of esoteric when you never have to look at it, but I encourage you to actually really look at it and think about, well, what does that mean for the projects that I'm working on? Are there any projects that I'm working on where, where maybe we've kind of gone beyond our scope of work, or beyond our I don't know, kind of stepped beyond the contract that we've set out. These might be things you could help flag for your project manager. All right, so I'm going to go on to so 30% of the project is, 30% of the CLARB exam is about project management. So this is one of the topics that I found, harder to learn about, probably also because I didn't have that $600 book to help me with. So again, I think really paying attention to the projects that you're working on, and which, and to how you, like, if you're not managing your own projects, maybe you are, and that's like kudos to you. And if you're not, then just kind of checking in with your project manager, and I'm sure they'd be very happy to kind of walk you through some of these things that they do. So things like managing a project team, scope, schedule, and budget, facilitating meetings. I found like some of the things are harder to test for. Like, how do you test for, how do you facilitate a meeting well? But other, things like what is the critical path method of scheduling a project? That was an easier thing to test for. So I found some of the project management stuff. I would say it was probably lighter. The exam was a little bit lighter on some of the project management stuff, and heavier on the kind of the ones that could have definitions. The if you know what a milestone list or a critical path method is, that's something that's easy to define, and so it was easier maybe to come up with exam questions for. So how do you get paid to learn about project management, especially if you're not already a project manager? This is, so if we go back to the last slide and we look at this, well, the project scope and budget that most likely got put together for whatever project you're working on, well, ask to see that, and then where, find out, like, where is this project at with the scope? Is my firm going to be able to get paid for the work that I'm doing right now? These are kind of questions that, if you're not already encouraged to ask them and pay attention to this stuff, it will help you professionally to pay attention to this, and I think your employers will be happy, because it will help you ensure that the projects you're working on are more likely to be profitable if you kind of understand what your scope is, what your firm is getting paid for, and then what your role is in kind of delivering that. So there are some other things that you could do. Maybe your firm has some quality assurance standards. You could find out, well, what are those if you don't know? How, maybe there's a way for you to review and improve those, or at least learn about what they are. Maybe you don't have standards at all, and you could talk to your employers about developing some. If you have a chance to facilitate meetings or prepare meetings, agendas or minutes, that's probably useful as well, and good experience in general. If you have a chance to develop a project schedule or milestone list, these are they're often done for like bigger projects or managing the construction side of things, but they can also be useful for actually within our own scope of work in the design side, to kind of really think about, well, what is my schedule going to look like, and are there some items that I really need to hit now? Even a small project can benefit from that. And I'm going to say this a couple times, but what I recommend is find the project that's going really badly in your firm. You probably have one or two. Which project is ridiculously over budget? And see if you can work on that project, and see if you can learn from the mistakes made in that project. If one of your projects is over budget, talk to the project manager or to help figure out how are you going to get back on track. And these are the types of skills that I think that this portion of the exam is looking to test. So 20% of the exam is bidding. So honestly, our firm doesn't do a lot of construction administration. We're often subconsultants, and we don't do that much of our own bidding. But I read Jimmy Hines for this section, and between my understanding of construction contracts, this book was really valuable. Then I was able to kind of understand the process that was happening. Other people were more or less guiding it, but reading the book really helped me be a more valuable contributor to that, to the construction administration and the bidding process, even if it wasn't me directly overseeing it. If your firm is involved in bidding, in putting together bid packages, for example, then you probably have an advantage over me for doing this exam. And if you can take part in putting those packages together, then I think you'll have a really good time with these kind of the 20% bidding part of this exam. If your firm isn't the contract administrator, then it's a good idea for you to try and understand on the projects you're working on, who is the contract administrator, and what kind of bid package are they putting together? What is the contract that they're using? Those types of things. So if you can identify those and start to understand them, that's going to really help you out. Some of the understanding the addenda process. So usually when you put a project out to tender, there's a period of time after the tender has been issued when the consultants can offer addenda. So those are changes, or issue addenda. Those are changes that are to the design that are still going to get priced out as part of the tender process. So if you have a chance to kind of issue tender drawings and then issue addenda as well, that'll help you understand the process a little bit better. Yeah, know what kind of contract your project is using, and understand the difference between a lump sum or a unit price contract. Those are things you're going to need to know on this exam, I'm pretty positive. If you have a chance to put together a schedule of quantities and you know what that is, that's also a good skill to learn. And I don't have the time, I think, in this study session to fully explain each of these things, but if you don't know what those are terms you probably need to look at. And then again, so I'm going to try and steer you back to look for those projects that are having a tough time in your office. So is there a project in your office that's going through value engineering? So maybe it got tendered out. The prices came in way too high. The client said, I don't have that kind of money. Make it cost less. And then you go through that process with them. That, I think, if you have a good amount of involvement in that process, that could be a really useful experience for passing the bidding portion of LARE Section 1. So here's an example of a project where we did that. We still is a really cool project. It got tendered out. The tender bids were incredibly high, mostly to do with the architecture, but we also had to scale back the landscape a lot. And so then I worked carefully with the contract administrator, preparing the next kind of reissue of tender, so that we could try to get alternate pricing on some items. Like if our seeded meadow used reused topsoil, well, would that save us money over our seeded meadow using imported topsoil? So we're trying to redesign the project to be cheaper, but also kind of redesign the way that we're tendering the project to see if we can get some less expensive bids come in. So that was a good experience to go through for studying. So the construction phase, I found, it says 30%. Honestly, I think that there's this is the section that I studied the most, and I think it was useful to study the most. I feel like this exam is very heavy on the construction administration or construction management side of things over the other sections. Maybe that was just kind of random luck with the set of questions that I got. But these are, you know, all of these terms are probably ones you want to have some understanding of. What are they? Like what's an RFI, request for information? If you get a chance to respond to that, well, then you probably will know how to do it. The most important thing, I think, is that you have a chance to be involved with field services for your projects. I know some of you might be working in planning or in other types of landscape architecture work that doesn't have concrete projects being built on the ground. If that's your situation, then I think you're going to have to study a little bit harder and maybe try to talk to some of your fellow interns who do have a chance to do this work in order to understand how that construction management process goes. Because this is one that can be easily learned on the job, but I think if you don't have that chance to learn on the job, you probably have to study quite a bit. Sorry, one sec. So if you do work at a firm that does, you know, that has projects that get built, then you should insist that you have a chance to be involved in the field services for the projects that you're working on, that you get to go out and review work, that you get to write field notes, write site instructions, write contemplated change orders. Can you go out to the warranty reviews? Can you put together punch lists for deficiencies at the end of a project? These are, first of all, it's very rewarding to get to go out on site and look at your designs built, but it's also, there's, you know, I think it's really useful for your learning and your development as a landscape architect or future landscape architect, to be able to experience this stuff firsthand. So if you're not getting to go out in the field, you should ask for that privilege or right, maybe. Again, you know, look for that project where, like this one, great project, great people, but geez, you know, a whole bunch of our trees died after they got planted. And then it wasn't clear whose fault it was, and you know, the owner wasn't watering, and it wasn't clear when the owner should have started watering. So look for that project where things went badly, and you know, plant material is dying or something got built wrong, and then you have to go through the contract and really figure out, well, what does the contract say? So this particular project probably helped me pass exam number one. I would say like a lot of the work that I did for this project was direct studying for LARE section 1, because we had all of these issues with the plant material, and it was really unclear whose fault it was. And I went through that construction contract line by line and our specifications, and I looked at the maintenance requirements in the specifications. And it wasn't super fun, but it was really valuable for me. So hopefully you don't have any projects like that, but if you do, it is a golden opportunity for you right now. And finally, the maintenance. It's listed as 10% on the CLARB website. I don't recall there being a ton of maintenance questions on the exam that I took, but it would be a good idea for you to take a look at, for example, the Canadian Landscape Standard. Your office, I hope, has a copy of this, and a new edition just came out. So there's some really good maintenance information in that document. And you probably also have some maintenance sections that show up in the specifications. So if you're involved in writing specifications for any of your projects, or even if you have a chance to review what the specifications say, your kind of standard office specifications, have a look at the maintenance sections. And those are probably going to be useful as a guidance document for getting through that portion of the exam. All right, so now what I'm hoping to be able to do is to open this up a little bit and allow some other people to talk. So what we're going to do is just go through some of these practice questions. So these are the standard ones from the CLARB website. They were put out in 2014, so they're a little bit dated now. But these are the ones that are kind of published for free. I did, in practicing for these exams, I did buy some kind of practice, there are some practice exam questions that you can purchase, and I found those useful to do, especially kind of like a month before taking the exam. But I didn't want to share any that are proprietary. So these are the questions you probably already had a look at. But we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're not going to just go through the questions. We'll do that, but mostly what I want you to think about as you're going through these questions is, well, are there ways that you can actually get paid to learn about what these questions are asking? And then I'm hoping that some of you will be able to actually share some of the examples of a time when those questions were relevant to their own work. So we're going to start. So basically, if you have we'll read through the questions together, and then just in your mind try to answer, figure out which answer is correct. And then if you are able to come up with some ideas of how can you get paid to learn this stuff, just put that in the chat. And if you're willing to share an example and be on camera, or, well, you could also have your camera off, at least just allow us to hear you. We'll unmute you. Just say in the chat that you would like to do that you have an example to share, or that you want to talk. And then we'll unmute you, and we'd be happy to hear some examples of when the stuff was relevant to your work. And I think that will really help everyone kind of start to understand how this stuff can be made concrete, and a little less like some weird thing you have to study just to pass an exam, and actually just something you need to know to do your job well. Okay, so question one in this these practice questions. A contractor will most often be given compensation for which of the following? Choose all that apply. Actually, I'm going to take a step back. There are a couple of different types of questions in the CLARB exam. There's multiple choice. These are the nice ones. You get to choose one answer, and there's one that's right. Then there's these multiple responses, and they will say, choose that, all that apply, or choose two, or choose three. Those choose all that apply are real buggers. They're, because you just don't know how many are correct. So just like with multiple choice, the best thing you can do is just make sure, if there are any that are just, they don't apply, take those off the list. The ones that you're confident do apply, you hit those. And then I found there was often one or two that I was like, well, that could be in, that could be out. And when you're taking the CLARB exam, there's a little flag you can hit the flag on any that you're not sure about, and then kind of do the exam and come back to those and think about it some more. But those multiple response questions are tricky. Okay, to the question. A contractor will most often be given compensation for which of the following? Choose all that apply. So a contractor will be given compensation for a cause that neither the owner nor the contractor have any control, an increase in the scope of work, C, a delay in decision-making on the part of the owner, or D, a delay due to a defect in the plans and specifications. So try to answer this question in your mind, and then also please just give us some ideas on how you might learn a bit more about the contract and contractor, and when they're entitled to compensation in your day-to-day work. I'm going to give you a minute here. All right, so the answer to this one, a contractor will most often be given compensation for which of the following. So these are the correct rules or the correct responses according to CLARB. So they will be given compensation for an increase in the scope of work, a delay in decision making on the part of the owner, or a delay due to a defect in the plans and specification. but a contractor will not be given compensation for a cause that neither the owner nor the contractor have any control. So a lot of contracts allow for time extensions, but not financial compensation if there's a delay for a reason outside of the contractor's control. So if you think about how maybe COVID has affected all of the projects, or many of the projects that are under construction right now, I know this happened to some of my projects that actually there was a bit of a slowdown. It took some time, there was a couple of weeks there where everything kind of just came to a halt. And so some of my projects actually needed time extensions, but COVID didn't allow the contractor to seek financial compensation directly for that reason. So if there's anyone who wants to chat or has an idea, yeah, it sounds like you're all unmuted, and or you can unmute yourself, sorry, and be happy to hear about you. You know, I'm sure some of you have a project where the contractor has been given some compensation, and I'd like to hear why was that, why was the contractor given compensation? What were the, you know, what were the reasons for it? I thought I heard someone there for a sec. Well, I can tell you of a time when so I have a project that's it's still getting built right now, and we have this amphitheater on the project. It's really cool, and it has these giant stone blocks. And when the contractor put the bid in for that project, he assumed that he would have full equipment access for installing this amphitheater. Well, it turns out that because the owner wanted to rush the building, they constructed the building before the landscape got installed, cutting off access, cutting off equipment access for installing this amphitheater. And so the contractor actually had to bring in a crane that could deal with these big blocks, and it was a lot more work for the contractor to install these huge stone blocks because they didn't have access to all of their regular equipment. So that was the type of situation where it was a decision on the part of the owner that made it more difficult for the contractor to do his work, and everyone agreed, and the contract was in agreement that it was fair for the contractor to be compensated for that extra work.
Tamara, can I ask a question?
Hey, Carrie Ann, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not used to this format, so I've been trying to raise my hand and other things.
Oh no.
Just jump right in. So my question is, did you have a lot of pushback by the owner? Like, how did that situation sort of get remedied? Was it, you know, were people in a room figuring it out, or was there or did the owner just sort of acquiesce in the situation?
In this case, you know, thankfully, all parties are they're getting along.
Okay.
There's a good level of trust between all parties on this particular project. That's not always true,
Right.
but there's on this project there has been a willingness from all parties to kind of come up with a fair solution. So one of the concessions that the contractor made on this project is that they billed directly for the cost of the crane. So the contractor didn't mark up the cost of the crane, and that helped the
Right.
client feel like they were getting a fair deal on this change.
Perfect.
Yeah. So so relationships, you know, there's the contract and what the contract says, and it's great if the contract is really, really clear. And sometimes you get in situations where you don't, you know, it's not black and white. What, you know, how the contract applies to this situation, and if if there's not a good relationship between the contractor, between the owner, between the contract administrator, and hopefully the landscape architect as well, it becomes more difficult to handle those types of problems.
Right. I guess like in my experience, we work with contractors sort of directly, and there's been a couple of instances where, for instance, we made an order for plants, and then our contractor went to pick up the plants, and the plants weren't pulled yet, and it was actually the owner of the plant supplier that had not told anyone that they, like it was just like a giant screw up, and ended up costing our contractor like 3 hours, and he had people waiting on site already, like 6 or 7 people to do the install. So all those people had to be paid for the extra 3 hours of doing nothing, and then the person who was there at the plant nursery, I mean, it was one giant kerfuffle. And unfortunately, I did not follow up with my employer to find out how everyone was compensated in that situation, and it was a low cost sort of like a nonprofit project that we were working on. So I really appreciate that you've been bringing up, like, just ask all these questions at work, because I am still completely oblivious to how people get paid and how all that works out when mistakes are made.
There's just so much going on in the background that, as a new intern or as a new employee, like I didn't know about any of this stuff. I just, you start out and you're kind of just like doing some CAD work for whatever whatever you're told to do, and then slowly, hopefully, you're given more and more kind of windows into all of this other work that goes on, and then you're like, whoa, this is really complicated.
Right.
So if you can try and open those windows for yourself, and even if you're not directly responsible, just try and understand some of the stuff that's happening in the background. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
All right. Does anyone else? Oh, I see a question from Rachel saying, what do you mean when you say compensated? You know what? I found this question a little bit unclear, because like a contractor will most often be given compensation for which of the following, and you're right, like, is that time or money or neither? And these are the ones where, especially with these multiple response choose all that apply, I'm gonna just guess that in this case, whoever wrote this question was thinking it was monetary compensation, because I know that contractors do get given time sometime for reasons out of their control. So I would do the practice exams, and sometimes on the practice exams, you actually don't agree with the right answers, and then you have to really think about, well, why, what is this question trying to ask me? I'm going to assume here it was trying to ask about monetary compensation, but that's an assumption. So thanks for pointing that out, Rachel. Okay. Question number 2 in the CLAR practice exam. The registered landscape architect shall be held responsible for providing professional services that do which of the following? Choose all that apply. So A, meet technical expertise at least at the same level as being ordinarily provided by other registered landscape architects in good standing within the same locality. B, do not violate applicable state, provincial, and local codes. C, are within the limit of his or her qualifications based on education and experience. And D, are within the limit of allowable activities as defined by the state and provincial licensing law. So as you're trying to think about, well, how do you, what are the right answers on this exam, practice exam question? Also try to think about if there was a time when maybe your firm was working on a project and you realized like you didn't have the expertise to do that work, and was someone else brought on, or how maybe there was a time when you flagged to your employer, hey, I'm being asked to do this work, but I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do it all. And what happened from that situation? All right, I'm going to switch over to the answer slide here. So all of them, turns out you have to adhere to the law and you have to be reasonably competent. So sometimes there are some, what I'm going to call this one a giveaway question. If the exam asks you anything about whether you need to meet the law or not, yes, you do every time. And you know, whether you need to kind of meet regular levels of competence or expertise, yes, absolutely you do. And whether you need to be qualified for the work you're doing, yep. So I think there are some questions that I think maybe are easier than others. Did anyone have an example they wanted to share? I'll give you another couple minutes here. Or how about an example where you've had to do some work as an intern, like maybe as a fresh intern right out of school, and you didn't know what you were doing. You know, how did you deal with that situation? Because I can tell you that that was pretty common for me right out of school.
I have an example.
Yay, Carrie Ann, saving the day again.
So I remember getting, we were working on a project that was within a SPIA, which is a streamside protection area. Can't remember it exactly right now, but, and we got our feedback back from the city and from parks, and you know, there's like pages and pages and pages of like what we need to do and how, you know, we have to make sure it's under whatever this and that and all these things. And my employer just sort of passed this over to me and it was like, okay, sort all this out. And I was like, oh my God, I need to learn everything there is to know about SPIAs and how to set up a silt trap and how to do these. Like I was so overwhelmed and I put so many hours in trying to understand like all these things. And then it turns out in the end that, you know, we actually had somebody who was working from, or there was an outside consultant, environmental consultant that had already been tapped, but they had just kind of disappeared out of the project because they just kind of, you know, sometimes they're busy and they don't respond right away. And it turns out that this person wrote like a 40-page report for this project, so it was gigantic. And I had assumed that that was under my scope because I was so new. So it's really good to check to make sure that you're the one that's expected to do all the stuff or not. Typically when it becomes that involved, there's somebody else out there that's their profession, and that's something I didn't really understand when I first got in.
Oh, that's an awesome example. And I can see how as a new intern, because
I'm like, I don't know.
You don't really, there's just so much you don't know. So it's hard to know, well, what's the line that I don't know? And where's the line that actually most landscape architects don't know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I could see that being difficult to understand, especially in the first couple years of work. I'm glad that there was someone who was able to answer all of that for you for the project.
Yeah.
I think Nicole, love to hear from Nicole as well. Nicole's having issues with her mic. We'll give you another minute here. See if you can sort it out, Nicole. Oh, Nicole says it's not going to happen. Not this time. Well, if you decide to jump in a little later, Nicole, go for it. Was there anyone else? Just send a quick chat if there's anyone else who wanted to take a stab at this one. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next. All right. Let's go to practice question. We're skipping to practice question 5. I didn't cover them all linearly. So there are still 3 and 4 for you to go back to and try on your own sometime. So question 5, if the survey information furnished by the architect is inaccurate, the landscape architect as a sub-consultant should A, inform the owner and request an accurate survey. B, inform the architect and request that the architect provide an accurate survey. C, direct the surveyor to provide additional information. Or D, take field measurements and make the corrections. So let's take D right out of there, because if we go back to the last question, well, how many of you are qualified to go out and take field surveys? I don't know, maybe some of you did that. I know there are some programs probably that offer that kind of work, but I can tell you I did not. So I would have taken D right out of that one. I'm not gonna go out there and do the survey myself. And then, so yeah, please feel free to chat if you're able, to share some ideas on how maybe you could learn about this more on the job, or provide an example. And I'm kind of giving the clue away a little bit, but you know, why is it, what is your relationship as a sub-consultant, or do you prefer to be when your firm is a prime consultant? Does that sometimes cause problems for you? All right, so we're going to switch over to the answer. So if the survey information furnished by the architect is inaccurate and the landscape architect, a sub-consultant, if you're the sub-consultant, then that's the word here you need to pay attention to, is the word sub-consultant. So in the question, they clearly identify that you're the sub-consultant. So you're going to go to the architect and ask them to provide a better survey, because as a sub-consultant, your direct link is with the architect, not with the client. So the architect has hired you and they're responsible for providing you with what you need to do your job. It's not actually, the relationship isn't between you and the client, it's between you and the architect. So pretty much any question you're going to have, you'll end up going through the architect. So there are a bunch of questions that kind of ask about information about the relationships between different parties. You know, what's the relationship between a sub-consultant and a prime consultant, or what's the relationship between the contractor and the client, or the contractor and the landscape architect? So I'm trying to have a good understanding of what are the formal relationships between the different parties involved on a project. That is something that I think gets tested fairly well on this exam. So I'm often the sub-consultant. Our firm is often sub-consultant on a project, and you know, the part that really gets to me sometimes is when we don't have a direct line of communication with our clients. I don't know if any of you have had that experience where you know, you have this like really circuitous route of communication, and that is maybe difficult to work with.
Sorry, I
Hi,
had
Hala.
I had a similar situation, but in a different way. I was the client, and the landscape architect was the sub-consultant, and it was really hard to understand what was going on with the sub-consultant when they are not coming to the meetings, when only the main consultant was the architect, and they're the ones who do come to the meetings. So yeah, at many points, because I'm a landscape architect and I did know how hard it is for the landscape architects to be able to understand what the client really wants or demands, I asked for the landscape architect to come to the meetings at several times so that we solve certain particular issues in the projects.
Oh yeah, great example. It's good to hear about it from someone, you know, on the other end, because I'm usually that LA hoping to get invited to the meeting. So that,
yeah, I mean,
that's great that you did it.
Yeah, because I was working with the government at that time, so we were like the committee who decides for the projects and who approves the projects. And often the landscape architects, when there is a main consultant, an architect who is working in the project, yeah, often they're left alone, and you've got many comments on the landscape architecture, and the architect is not able to answer them. It's often left like no one knows what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So did you work? Have you also had the chance to work on projects where, say, as a landscape architect or a designer, you had a contract directly with a client, as opposed to through the prime consultant?
Yeah, I worked like in 2-3 when I was like working by my own. I worked for like with 2-3 projects, but I was directly contacting the client. I was working with the client and directly contacting the client, but it wasn't easy as well.
No, nothing is easy, is it?
Yeah, it wasn't easy because the client, I mean, it's like the client was able to buy a furniture piece for $50,000, and he doesn't care as long as it's signé or branded. But when it comes to paying the landscape architecture fees, they're like, no, it's too much. I mean, it's too much work as well, but no, they just like reduce from the landscape architecture fees, and they pay on the whatever furniture and whatever other things they will put in their design. So it was like, yeah, it's really hard.
Did you have a good contract with that client, or was it maybe a little looser?
Yeah, I guess that was the thing. It was the first project I was taking by my own, and yeah, I guess that's the thing. It was a little bit loose.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't in Canada. It was in a different country, and I guess yeah, we should have had like a contract from the start explaining everything. How we get paid, how the contractor get paid, because at the end of the day there were problems with whatever payment was to be, either for the contractor or for the landscape architect and designer.
Hala, I have a feeling you're going to do well on this exam. I think that's my advice is to everyone is try to find a project that's going badly. You get to experience that firsthand, and then you really understand, oh shoot, like I needed that contract, and I needed that contract to be clear and to say what I really wanted it to say, you know, and you start reading through whatever contract or documentation you have to try to figure it out. That's not fun to go through, but useful for this.
Thank you. That's a very good advice. Thank you.
I got a comment. There's a comment from Sarah. I'm going back to the first question. Sarah, do you want us to go back to the first question, and you could share that with the group? What do you think?
I guess that comment, it was because I wrote a comment in the questions and answers.
Oh, I missed it.
Yeah, so they were telling me to copy it here. It was when you talked about the compensation for the contractor, and I was also referring to my work with the government when we had to compensate many times with the contractor based on the client's modifications, or that caused additional cost to the project, or that caused more work to be done. So we provided them with time extensions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, clients changing their minds, that tends to add cost to a project for sure.
Yeah, it happened at several times because I was working at that time with the Abu Dhabi municipality, and whenever they change a manager, it was like the manager will be, specifically with the landscape architecture, they are very subjective, like he wants the project to be his own, and they start modifying things with the contractor and at the execution stage. And yeah, at many times we had to compensate either with money or with time.
Yeah, yeah, I have some projects that have gone that route as well, where the client starts to change things, and then, you know, I think the important thing there is that you need to convey to the client that when they go around and change things on site, that probably means it's going to cost them more money, and I don't know that all clients know that.
Yeah, that too. But we were the specialists, and we used to infer that will cause you money. But I mean, over there things are different because you've got the royalties, and if a royalty wants something, no one cares how much it will cost.
Ah, right. Yeah, this different situation than I'm used to.
Different situation. What we care about is that to please him and not to make him angry every time he passes through that road or anything.
Very different.
It's very different. It's completely subjective and very diplomatic how you will be deciding what to do. You've got to be wise in order to give the message right, but at the same time very diplomatic in order not to tell him that you're wrong or it cannot happen, because that will destroy your relationship.
Wow.
Yeah.
I see Shanna also had her hand up. Shanna, did you want to pipe in here?
I was just going to share an experience that we're having with being a challenge being a subconsultant.
Yeah, great.
We are working on a project and we're subconsulting to an engineering company. So we're doing the LID design on it, and there's another landscape architect involved as well. But our communication is solely through the engineer from this prime consultant company, and it's a real challenge because the landscape architect is providing information to the engineer who's providing information to us, but it would be easier if we could work directly with the other landscape architect and work with the client, but all of the communication is going through this one engineer, and there's information getting lost, and it's not being translated properly, and it's just resulting in a huge increase in fees and rework, and it's just so frustrating.
I feel like this particular question is turning more into like a counseling session for us.
Totally.
I hear you, sister. I hear you.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to switch. I think we have time maybe for one or two more of these. So I'm going to go to the next one. Thank you so much, everyone, for contributing. Let's see if I can get there. Okay. Question 6. Which of the following examples is not a reason why a team extension for a construction project should be granted? So this is actually pretty similar to question 1, really talking about, what does the contract say here around compensation or extension. So maybe that's the clue here. We're talking about time extension, not compensation. So which of the following examples is not a reason why a time extension for a construction project should be granted? Unusually severe weather conditions, owner-ordered scheduling changes, design changes, subcontractor delays. So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to think about what you think the answers are, but then also if you can think of an example on a project where a contractor needed a time extension. I know we've talked about this a little bit, but maybe some others have some examples to share. All right, so the answer to question 6. So which of the examples is not a reason why a time extension for a construction project should be granted? So yeah, weather conditions can result in time extension, when the owner does something that results in the schedule changing. When the design changes, it's generally considered fair to provide a time extension. But if the subcontractor, so if the contractor says, oh my, this guy that I subbed, sorry, he's falling behind, well, that's not a legitimate question because the subcontractors, it's all kind of assumed that the contractor is responsible for the subcontractor's performance. So here's, yeah, these types of questions are very well covered in the construction contracts. I'm just like pitching this book. You'd think I'd be getting royalties or something for it, but really useful for this exam. Yeah, Carrie Ann, you can borrow that book from me. So Nicole has an example, but she can't access her mic. Nicole, if you'd like to just type it up, I can read it out. You know, everyone has access to the chat, but it's kind of funner to read it out loud, I think. Now, I bet Hala has an example for this one with the royalty.
Yeah, well, yeah, with the royalty, it's we do not make them interfere with the contractors at some point, only with the designers and with the other parts. But I have, because I come from a background of architecture and I have a master's in landscape architecture. In architecture, it used to happen a lot that whatever delays, problems happen, it's always the cause of the contractor. And especially if as a subcontractor, which he always comes and nags like, I didn't do the job because the subcontractor is delaying me and is having problem. He always takes the blame because it's him who hired and who picked that subcontractor. So he has to make sure that the subcontractor is doing the right work on time. So yeah, and architecture it's used to happen a lot in many of the projects that we were working with. I was more a consultant while working with architecture, but when I started work with landscape architecture, I was more like a specialist with the government, so it's different experience between.
Oh, okay. But yeah, you're right that if the contractor, they have direct control over hiring out their subcontractors, so it's kind of their responsibility to make sure that that the subcontractor fulfills their portion of the work. It's not the client's or our responsibility. Okay, so Nicole says she works for a design build, and this happened during the build process. As builders, we were subcontractors on a larger development. Parts of the area we were supposed to start building wasn't prepared or ready to start. So as subcontractors, we had to delay our work, and thus we had to ask for more time. Yeah, that's right. So subcontractors are also in that, they're in a position where they're kind of, they might not have a lot of control over the situation. So if this is actually something that comes up quite a bit on some of the projects that I'm working on as well, like the landscape contract is often awarded as a subcontract, and the landscapers, maybe they're provided a time window in which to do their work, but then they show up on site and it's not ready. The subgrading is not ready, and the subgrading is usually in someone else's scope of work. So if the subgrade's not ready for them to start on, then they're not going to be able to get started, and so they're going to need a time extension for their portion of the work. However, it's a responsibility of the contractor, the general contractor who subbed out to them to kind of plan for all of that. So depending on the situation, the client might say, well, too bad for you, I need my project done now. So Nicole, I think for you working as in a design build firm, you probably get a lot of experiences to kind of experience, a lot of chances to experience this stuff in a much more like first-hand way. I'm curious if you, I actually don't know very much about how the contracts work in a design build type of scenario, but I imagine you have some good learning opportunities as well in your work. All right, last chance for piping in on this one. We're going to move on to one more question, and then it's going to be 10 o'clock, and our weekend can start for real. Okay, this is question 8 from the CLARE practice exams. So licensed landscape, you know what, I'm going to skip this one. It's kind of a boring question. So yeah, you have to supervise work that you stamp as an LA. Okay, let's see. I'm going to skip to question 9. During the bidding estimate period, a significant error on the plans is discovered. Oh, this is a good one. The landscape architect should issue a, sorry, I'm screwing this up. The landscape architect should issue A, an addendum immediately, B, an addendum after the bid opening, C, a change order once construction has started, or D, a change directive after the bid opening but before construction has started. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the bidding process. So again, pitch for Hines, pretty good explanation of how that works in that book. But also if you have a chance to experience it directly, then go for that. When I first started practicing, or first started, I guess, the internship process, I didn't know anything about bidding. You know, our program at UBC didn't teach us very much about it at all. I didn't know what an addendum was, and I feel like there should be a question in this exam about, like, is addendum is that a singular or multiple form of the word? But so in, you know, the bidding process, basically your job as a landscape architect is to put together as complete of drawing and specification package as you can in time for tender, because any changes that happen after the project has been bid are likely to be more expensive to the client. When the client is putting out the project to bid, they get a series of competitive bids back. So, you know, landscape contractor A is trying to outbid landscape contractor B and C and D to get the job. So they're going to hopefully be providing some really competitive, good pricing to the client. After that project gets awarded, say landscape contractor A gets the job, and then changes are made, he knows he's got the job, and he can, or she can charge, probably can get away with charging a bit more for the work. So this is what the addendum process is about. We'll switch over to the answers. So if you're, you know, in the bidding period and you realize there's some big problem with the plans, then you want to try to get an addendum out as fast as you can, so that that change can be shared with all of the prospective bidders, and the change can be reflected in the price that they put forth for the project. So yeah, so this kind of, some of this write-up explains, you know, that ideally you need to be able to get this change out to people, to the contractors with enough time so that they can price it accurately, and with enough time so that everyone has a chance to see it fairly. So I'm not sure how many of you get a chance to work kind of with tender documents or with bidding. I wonder, is this, it looks like, Nicole, you've got more to add. I wish your mic was working.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay, I got it to work. Well, actually, no, I didn't have I think that was a mistake, but I'm
glad
to
okay,
know
well, you're
that
on the hook now.
now my mic works. Well, thank you.
Do you sometimes issue tender drawings or addenda? Is that something you've done?
Yeah, we definitely issue tender drawings, but it's interesting working for a design build because we often build the projects that we design. So we don't, we kind of do, like when we are issuing tender drawings for someone else to build, then we kind of have to be a bit more thorough and go through all the proper channels. But when we're building something, sometimes we don't go through all the proper channels.
So does it ever happen that you, you know, you've got a design and then partway through the process you come up with something that's going to be way more expensive to build than what you had assumed? How does that work in a design build?
I feel like the whole process is a lot more informal, and we just have kind of more intimate relationships with our clients and other builders. So if we want to make changes, we kind of just discuss with everyone. And if we have to like do something revised in drawings or contracts, maybe, but a lot of times it's really informal, especially it depends on the scale we're working at and what it's intended for. Like sometimes we work on like residential projects, and that often like our client will come to us and say they want to do something totally different than what we already started. And we're already building stuff, you know, it's like pretty far into the process. So we just kind of work around what we're told like they want to do. And maybe that's going to be a big cost change. But actually this has happened, and it becomes kind of an issue sometimes. Like we had a project a year ago where we were working with a client on a residential project, and this person's actually a builder. And so he started making changes on the fly quite a lot without even consulting us, and like just requesting changes. It was really disorganized, and like we would try and have more of a streamlined process, but he kind of would just go ahead and do things. And then at the end, it was going to be way more expensive than our original contract or our original bid for him. And he kept going back to these original documents saying like, why is this more expensive? And it's like, well, you changed a lot on your own without even consulting us. And then we had to accommodate your changes. So this is all going to cost more money, like time, materials. It's totally like almost like the original bid was irrelevant by the end of the project. So it was like a long process of going back and forth with that client to shore up like, no, this is like, you owe us this money.
It sounds like that was maybe more than the construction management, just much of a project management learning experience for you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like in the end, it's like, well, maybe there should have been more like documentation throughout the process to like have it in writing, like these are changes that are being made without like that have kind of overrid previous documents.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What that's is our firm doesn't do the design build,
Right.
but so what we have to really keep track of is our just our design time, because we get the same scenario with clients or clients needing more work from us. Often it's not driven by the client, but by, you know, municipal reviews or something that end up creating far more work than we had ever anticipated. But it gets really difficult sometimes to communicate that you're going to need more money for this work to the client. They're not always receptive to that.
We had similar situations for addendums and changes, but those changes were a cause of applying the guidelines that when the project was designed and the client approved on the design, they weren't applying the guidelines of the city really well. And in order to get the approval from the municipality or from the city, they had to do certain modifications and on the design itself in order to get their approvals. And in that case, there were implications on the cost and on the water demand and whatever that was going on in the project. And there were addendums for the landscape architecture in order to get the approvals.
So all of that work was figured out during the tender process that work was going to be required.
Yeah, it was during the tender, during the approval process when they were applying to register the project and to get its approval from the municipalities.
Ah. You know, we're getting to 2 minutes out. If anyone has a last, you know, maybe learning experience they'd like to share with us, that would be great. Give you a minute to put up your hand. Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap it up. And yeah, I guess I wish you all very good luck. I have a good luck slide. I'm going to switch to that. There it is. Yeah, this is actually a project that didn't go very poorly. It went very well. The construction and management of it went well, but it was a pretty big project. It was a kind of a multiple block subdivision and design that we oversaw. And this park was opened, it was completed, the construction fencing came down like March 2nd or something like that. And then the minute the construction fencing came down, they had to wrap the whole park up in COVID tape. So I didn't get to take a good photo of it until just recently when they took the COVID tape down. And thankfully that corresponded with some of the flowers blooming. So hopefully that's a cherry image to set you off with. And I hope that you all are, you know, excited about this process that you're on. It's a lot of work, but you're going to learn a lot just by studying for the exams. I know that I did, and I'm sure you all do great.
And just before everyone's fully gone out of the room, just on behalf of BC, Alberta, Ontario, Manitoba, thank you so much, Tamara, for giving your time. And it was a great session. There was lots of engagement. You held everyone, sort of tucked it out for the full hour and a half, which is pretty great. So thank you very, very much for your work, and we really, really appreciate it. And everyone, good luck in your next exam. I know the December exam window has now been opened. So hopefully you're all signing up and getting ready. And just a reminder for those of you taking sections 1 and sections 2, you do have the ability to do that through remote proctor now. That is a new thing. It's available ongoing. So on behalf of all of us, have a great rest of your weekend and good luck with your exams as well. Thank you so much, Tamara.
Yeah, and thank you, Todd and Sarah and Tara, for all of the help getting this organized. Couldn't have done it without you.